we're live. Hooray.
There we go, that's it.
Lovely.
And there we go. Should be us.
Apologies for the delay. We were just having some technical problems, but we're here now. Hello.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Glad you could finally join us after the technical issues. So, my name's Ellis, and I help with the sort of social media side of the museums. And this is my lovely colleague Judith.
Hello. Hi. I'm the museum curator.
Yeah. So she's going to be telling you a bit about her history and the upcoming talk that we're going to be hosting on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. So this talk that we're organising on Sunday is going to be held at St Michael's Church in Dumfries, but we're conscious that not everyone will be able to join us in person on St Michael's Church in Dumfries. This talk is part of the Wild Goose Festival, which is a Dumfries and Galloway-wide celebration of nature, creativity and place. Hello, Fiona. Nice to see you from St Michael's Church. And that's why we're sitting in front of this display inside Dumfries Museum. It's got lots of lovely nocturnal animals and nighttime creatures, and we've just recently added a moon that sort of changes. So we thought it was suitably appropriate, Halloween-y, but also it ties in with the themes of the Wild Goose Festival, which are all about nature, creativity and place, not just geese. And what we're thinking about with Halloween, why is Halloween included in that? Well, really it's because of Dumfries having its close connection with Robert Burns, but also this time of year, as the wheel of the year turns and as the nights get darker, and we start to think about spooky and more morbid things, perhaps.
Yeah, lovely description. So before working here, you worked at a museum that was quite sort of connected to sort of witchcraft and supernatural.
Yes, I did. For a number of years, for 5 years, in fact, I worked at the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Cornwall, which is the world's oldest and largest collection of witchcraft and magic-related material in the world. It was established in 1951 by an incredible magical practitioner called Cecil Williamson. And it includes all sorts of objects from people like Aleister Crowley and Gerald Gardner to folk magicians and witches or people accused of witchcraft, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And we had an exhibition while I was there on Halloween. It was called Halloween Glitter and Grave Dust. This is the little guidebook that we produced, all about Halloween and its history. And so I became a little bit knowledgeable about the history of Halloween.
No, it's definitely an interesting topic, isn't it? Considering what used to be like in the past and compared to sort of the more modern traditions that most of us will be familiar with.
Yeah, I think Halloween's one of those things that people think they know what it is, but maybe they don't, or they have some guesses or some assumptions about what it is. But maybe, I think everyone knows it's something to do with witchcraft, possibly. It's definitely to do with costumes and food and nighttime and possibly death. Or death, spooky things. But actually, what is it is the sort of question that we looked into the history of it.
Yeah. Would you like to give a wee preview in terms of what we're going to be talking about on Sunday?
So our event on Sunday is going to start with a wonderful organist playing Auld Lang Syne. And the reason we're doing that is because Auld Lang Syne, I'm just holding up an old copy of an old postcard. This old postcard actually has tartan all the way around it, and it says, "For Auld Lang Syne this Halloween." So most people know Auld Lang Syne as a song that Burns made popular and Burns wrote, and he actually wrote it while he was in Dumfries and Galloway. But they really associate it more with New Year's.
Yeah.
So it's quite surprising, I think, to see so much tartan and the phrase Auld Lang Syne connected with Halloween. And this is a 19th century postcard. So in the 1800s, Halloween was very much connected with Scotland and very much connected with Robert Burns. So that's one of the reasons we're holding it in St Michael's Church, which is where Burns is actually buried in the mausoleum.
I see, because as you say, when it comes to Auld Lang Syne, I personally think more sort of Hogmanay, New Year's. So the connection with Halloween was something I was unaware of.
Yes, I'm not sure that a lot of people are that aware of the association of Auld Lang Syne with Halloween. But the real reason is, it's because October the 31st used to be seen as the end of summer. So sometimes it's called Winter Eve or November Eve. So it was the last day of summer in some Irish and Scottish sort of traditional cultures. It was called Samhain, which means summer's end. So it's the end of summer, which is basically New Year. So it would be when all the harvesting's done, all the livestock have been brought in, and it'd be a time for everyone to settle their accounts, deal with anything that needs dealing with, maybe slaughter the animals that needed slaughtering for the winter, have a big party, and basically say, right, now is the beginning of winter. So it's essentially used to be New Year's Eve, which is why even till the 1800s it was associated with Auld Lang Syne.
See, that explanation makes sense.
But there's another Robert Burns connection as well, because Robert Burns is completely associated with Dumfries. And that's that he wrote a fantastic poem called Halloween as well, which was all about, that's just one of our working clocks in Dumfries Museum, which we wind all the time. So Robert Burns wrote a poem called Halloween. And lots of people ask, like, is Halloween pagan or is it Christian? And if you have questions or things you'd like to put in the chat, please do put questions or comments you've got in the chat. That would be great. So people ask, like, is Halloween Christian? Is it pagan? And by Burns's time, which is the 1700s, it was really neither. It was just I would suggest it isn't today either. Although it is to some people an incredibly significant pagan festival. It's really just a folk custom. It's something that people do. Burns, I don't think when he wrote about it, I don't think he was meaning it as it's the pagan Samhain or it's the medieval Christian Halloween. He just wrote about the things that people do on Halloween. And maybe they didn't know why they did it, or maybe they did. But they did all sorts of things to do with magic. Which is really what's associated with Halloween.
I see. So let's have a look. So talked a little bit about that. So you've got some quite interesting objects here that relate to the sort of supernatural side.
So yes, if you think, like, what objects do we have in the museum to do with Halloween? The answer is not really any. I mean, I'm not sure any museums have very much specifically to do with Halloween. The Museum of Witchcraft and Magic did a little bit. But any object really can be to do with Halloween. This is a replica of the Balmaclellan mirror. That's an Iron Age mirror that was found in Dumfries and Galloway. And a mirror is something associated with Halloween. So a mirror can be used to see into the other world. So people would hold up a mirror at night and peel an apple and throw it over their shoulders, or light a candle, and their loved one would appear, their future would appear in the mirror. So mirrors are like crystal balls, essentially. But a bowl of water would be the same. Anything that you see a reflection in can be used for something called scrying. So that means you look into it and you concentrate deeply, and you might see the future, or you might see the other world, or you might see a vision or something that gives you information that's not normally available to you. So it's access to forbidden knowledge or knowledge that you wouldn't normally have. So usually we would say to do scrying, you would need to be someone who's practiced magic. So a witch or a wise woman or a cunning man would be able to do this because it takes practice and concentration. But on Halloween, it's a night where anyone can do it. Because it's the night, because it's a liminal night, so it's the end of summer, the beginning of winter. That means it's at the edge of things. That means it's liminal, and that means it's a night where you might see into the other world, and you might see the veil between the worlds. We live in the mundane, boring world, and there is the other world, the world of ghosts and fairies, the past, the future, the place where anything's possible, essentially, the supernatural world. So on Halloween, it's because it's a liminal time, a time of change. It's a night where you can peer between the veil between the worlds and see into the other world. So you don't need special magical powers. You don't need anything special. You could do this with a bowl of water. You could do this with a mirror. You could do it with a cabbage. You could tell your future with a cabbage. So if you pull a cabbage out on Halloween, you can read the stalk and see what shape it forms will tell you a future. So if you ask it a question like, who am I going to marry? And you pull it out and it's shaped like a J, and you might think, oh, I'm going to marry John. Or if you pull it out and it's shaped like an anchor, you might marry a sailor. If you pull it out and all the soil stays on, you're going to be rich. If you pull it out and all the soil falls off, you're going to be poor.
So I'm going to have to go find
a way
a
of asking questions and getting answers. So anything can be used for scrying. And this is another object in the museum. It doesn't look particularly like much. It's actually a stone. And what has this got to do with Halloween? Well, these are fossilized sea urchins, which you can see here. So this is a fossilized sea urchin. And they were known in the past as fairy loaves. And there's loads and loads of objects in the museum that are fossils or ancient objects, and they're understood by us now scientifically or archaeologically. But they've also got fairy connections. And Halloween is completely associated with fairies. Yeah. Because this idea of peering into the other world is a land of the Fae. Fae means other. Yeah. So it could mean fairy, it could mean ghost, it could mean witch, it could mean troll, it could mean all sorts of things, but it's anything that's other. And these fairy loaves are things that people believed that if you had a fairy loaf in your cupboard would never be empty, because you would always have the bread of the fairies and the luck of the fairies. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things associated with fairies and Halloween. And fairies and witches are very interchangeable in folklore and folk legend. One of the oldest Halloween costumes was just children going out at night with their clothes turned inside out. So they would just take their coat off and turn it inside out. And that's a traditional way to break a fairy's spell. So if you got swept off into fairyland, which happens a lot in folk stories, if you couldn't figure out how to get out and you were lost in the mists of fairyland, if you had the wherewithal to take a coat off and put it on backwards, it would break the spell and you'd return to the normal world. So putting your clothes on inside out and going out on Halloween would be a way that you could enjoy the night and all its mystery, but still be safe from otherworldly beings.
It's kind of disguising yourself.
It's protective magic. And another traditional Halloween costume or thing that mothers used to do in Ireland was rub salt in their children's hair before they went out on Halloween night, which was, again, salt is a protective aspect. So it would protect you from evil spirits.
I didn't know about the salt connection. But that's really interesting.
But Halloween is supposed to be a night where all the spirits roam the earth. October the 31st, it's got lots of different names in lots of different cultures. In Welsh, Irish and Scottish culture. And almost all of them associated with the return of the dead. So in Mexico, it does coincide. It's the same time period for Dias de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. So it's essentially in Irish tradition, it would be the night when all the barrows, all the mounds, the burial mounds would open and the dead would walk the earth again. So you need to take action to protect yourself, but also to welcome in the spirits that you want to see. Halloween isn't always about scary dead things or scary supernatural things. It's also about connecting with the darker side of life and recognizing that that's part of life, that light and dark, death and life are connected. They're part of a cycle.
That's really cool. See, we've got a quick question from Fiona Lee asking if we've personally had any supernatural experience.
Well, I did actually have one in this museum with our lovely friends at Mostly Ghostly. We often do an event with Mostly Ghostly in the museum called Waking the Witch, where we look at witchcraft accusations in Dumfries, and we start in the museum and then they take them on a tour around the town and show people places connected with witchcraft persecution and accusations in the town. And we were all stood here in this hall and we all looked up. We heard a noise upstairs and we all looked up at the same time in the same place, and we thought someone was up there, but no one was up there. And so that's probably the closest to a supernatural experience that I've had. We were all convinced someone was up there, and no one was. And one of my colleagues says she's experienced that a lot, and that it's believed to be the ghost of the architect of the museum.
Oh, I hadn't heard that tale before.
No. Well, there's other people who've experienced other things in the museum. That's the only one I've experienced here. I did hear a voice when I was working at the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Yeah.
But I sort of convinced myself it was someone in the cafe next door. But the other one, we were all convinced.
Yeah. So you've got one other item here.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to tell us a wee bit about that?
Well, this is an amazing object, part of Dumfries Museum's collection. It's not from Dumfries and Galloway. It actually says on it, a spirit cup of the South Sea Islands. And it's carved out of, I think, a coconut or something along those lines. And it's got these two heads on either side and these beautiful sort of carvings. I think that they're birds, which would connect with the idea of spirits, but it's possible that they're not. It would be good to get someone with more knowledge about the South Sea Islands to look at it. But it's a spirit cup. It's a vessel. So going back to the idea of not all spirits are bad and they're not all out to harm you, and there's not necessarily anything to be frightened of if they're what you want in your life. So on Halloween, people used to leave their doors open or their windows open. Mm-hmm. They used to leave the table set so that when their dead come back, they can come and have a dinner and be remembered. It's not afraid of them. It's your dead, not the dead. And spirits too, not always nasty, malevolent things. And this is a cup. So if you conjured forth a spirit, if you did magic to bring forth a spirit, maybe you want to ask it a question, get some information. Maybe you want it to help you perform a task, a magical task. When you bring forth a spirit, you kind of need to capture it in something. So you need to keep it in something. And often spirit vessels would have lots of things inside them to keep the spirit busy and entertained so that it doesn't get distracted. So this is a spirit vessel. So once a spirit's been summoned forth by a magical practitioner, it would have been contained within this vessel. And somehow or other, it's made its way thousands of miles from the South Sea Islands to Dumfries Museum, and it's on display in our Cabinet of Curiosities case. But we do also have some documents. A lot of people associate Halloween with witchcraft. So there's a very famous picture, which is in this book by J. Maxwell Wood, which is called Witchcraft and Superstitious Record in the Southwestern District of Scotland. And there's quite a famous picture showing the burning of 9 women accused of witchcraft on the White Sands in Dumfries. So that's a picture that is potentially historically misleading. There were definitely people executed in Dumfries as part of the terrible witchcraft persecution. But whether or not it took place on the White Sands or not is debatable. But it's important to recognise, I suppose, that Halloween and witchcraft have been subject to a great deal of misunderstanding. And Halloween, a lot of people think of it as a horrible pagan festival or a corporate commercial festival or something to do with the devil or something to do with horror films. But its history is much longer and more complicated than that. So that's kind of what we're going to look at in the talk on Sunday.
Oh, it sounds all really exciting. So just sort of putting it out there at the moment, does anybody have any questions, or could be related to Halloween or museum in general? If you want to pop them in the chat, we're more than happy to answer. So Sunday's talk, just while we're waiting to see if anyone's got any questions. So it's at St Michael's Church, not the museum.
No, it's not in the museum. We had a talk here last year on women, witchcraft and birds, which was filled to the rafters. And we're just not really set up for a lot of people. And we're really hoping that we get a lot of people who come along and want to learn about the real history of Halloween. And it's really appropriate that it's going to be in the church, because churchyards are associated with October the 31st, whatever you call it, Samhain, Halloween, All Hallows Eve, November Eve, whatever we want to call it. It's Halloween, that night has always been associated with some aspect of death. The spooky side of it, the scary side of it, the fun side of it, but also the more somber aspects of it
Yeah.
People used to leave food on the gravestones, and they used to light up the cemeteries. And that's how carved pumpkins sort of started. They're called mort lamps. So to ward off evil and to share light in darker times. So there's lots of reasons why a churchyard's a good place for it. Plus Halloween, its name, is a Christian holiday. It means holy evening. And Halloween was the start of Hallowtide, which is 3 days of holiness. So it was the holy time of the year in the medieval calendar. And the main thing that people did on Hallowtide was ring church bells. That was one of the main ways that people celebrated Halloween in the medieval period, by the ringing of church bells.
And pumpkins are a more recent Halloween tradition, aren't they?
They are, but people have carved vegetables, turnips mainly, for a long time. We were talking earlier about, is there any material culture, are there any objects in museums to do with Halloween? Well, there's a museum in Ireland that has a beautiful, well, I think beautiful, but it's quite weird looking as well, but it's really fun. A really old carved turnip head. And it's sort of all, but yeah, that's about 200-year-old carved turnip head. So people have been carving turnips into mort lanterns or jack-o'-lanterns, and the phrase jack-o'-lantern goes back quite a few centuries. Jack-o'-lantern was Jack was a troublesome person, and when he died, he went to heaven, and God said no, and then he went to hell, and the devil said, no, we don't want you here either. And Jack tried to get into hell, and the devil threw a lump of coal at him, which he caught in his head. He was dead at this time, and that was the first carved vegetable pumpkin thing. And Jack was the first person in purgatory, because he was neither in heaven nor in hell. And Halloween is very much associated with people who are in that limbo state. In the medieval Christian religion, it's very much about the people in purgatory, the souls who are suffering. So that's it's an interesting connection. But pumpkins, yes, are American. Yes, they've been basically taking the place of turnips. If you ever want to have a go, you could carve yourself a turnip. It's really hard. Pumpkins are much easier, much more effective. But the turnip is the more traditional vegetable.
I had a friend try to carve a turnip, and she found it very hard.
Yes, exactly.
I can see a comment from Wendy Stewart asking what the museum is doing and showing how old Samhain celebrations are. I was like, I'm not going to pronounce that way.
Yes, there's a horror films called Halloween. Halloween 1, 2, and the third one is all about Samhain, but throughout it they call it Samhain, which is how it's written. But the person in it, he just repeatedly refers to Samhain. Samhain.
So are we doing anything to show old Halloween, or is it mostly sort of talk?
Yes, we're having a talk, and we're also having an event again with our lovely friends, Mostly Ghostly, in Dumfries's oldest house, the Old Bridge House, on Thursday night this week. We are going to be opening up the Old Bridge House for Tales of the Old Bridge. So it's a site that's been associated with pilgrimage, so people crossing it over, also executions, and lots of other interesting things. There was a lady who used to live there, who was known as Granny Black, and she helped deliver babies, but she also laid out corpses ready for funerals. So many of the sort of traditional things done by wise women. So she's quite an interesting character, and sometimes people associate her with, she's a 20th century figure, but sort of seen as a bit of an old crone in the nicest possible way. Obviously, maiden mother crone is part of modern witchcraft. So
that's Thursday in the evening, was it?
Yes, it is. And it's recommended that you book for that, because it's a tiny little house, as you would guess. It was built in 1660.
So it's been really fascinating so far. As I say, if anyone else has any questions, don't worry. If it's sort of Halloween museum, pop them in. going back to sort of witchcraft and your time at the museum, do you have any sort of favourite stories from your time in the witchcraft museum?
Yes, but I mean, I could talk about that for hours. I suppose I just found it to be a really enlightening thing.
Yeah.
I thought that I was open-minded before I worked there, and I really learned so much, so many incredible people, so many different ways of looking at the world. And just a completely different worldview, and meeting people. People walk different magical paths.
Yeah.
So some people, it's very much about traditional witchcraft connected with hedge witchcraft or the ways of the wise in this country, and pre-Roman religion. Other people, it's much more about sort of environmentalism and feminism, and some people really connect with Egyptian gods or Norse gods or Diana or Selene or Hecate and other goddesses. And I just found it to be incredible to speak to people and meet people and learn about these practices and try to think, how do you represent something so complex and so sort of stigmatized potentially in a way that's interesting and informative for the general public. So it was a real privilege to work there, and if you haven't visited, I would strongly recommend it. And if you've not read anything or know anything about the ideas of witchcraft or the ideas of paganism, then it might be of interest to you. I'm not a practicing pagan myself. I just think that it's all of these different religion and spiritual paths that just make you think about the world, and make you think about different ways of seeing the world and understanding the world.
That's really cool.
Someone enjoyed carving turnips when they were younger. Yes, lots of people. I mean, the other thing I suppose we'll talk about in the talk is it is very much, people might think of it as an American holiday, and there's definite aspects of American mass production that have come into Halloween. But a lot of people remember, getting monkey nuts on Halloween, or calling it mischief night or Miggy night, or even people just used to go around and loosen gates, so that when the person came the next morning, their gate would fall off. So just being naughty and silly, it's a night for transgression. And there are lots and lots of connections with Scotland, not just Robert Burns, but there's traditional costumes, there's traditional things like turnips and monkey nuts, and there's things like there's a tradition of guising and going from house to house and singing songs. And in Scotland, as across the UK, Halloween used to be like bonfire night, essentially, and bonfire night sort of replaced Halloween. So it used to be the night of bonfires. It was a fire festival. And when the government essentially wanted to push out Halloween as being medieval superstition and encourage bonfire night, because bonfire night was about the king triumphing over Catholics and his enemies, so it was a more acceptable holiday. So lots of the things you associate with bonfire night, bonfires, and guising and things like that, actually a lot of those derive from Halloween.
I used to always love going guising with my parents and my younger sibling, and we always had to prepare the best sort of spooky joke in order to sort of get the sweets and stuff. Wee bit old-fashioned, but still a fun memory. I believe that's sort of all the questions. So Sunday in the evening, there will be more information on our Facebook page, social media, for how to attend, and also on the Wild Goose Festival page. They'll have all the information you need, as well as any other events. If you're looking for something fun to do, because it's the final week of the October holidays, isn't it, this week?
It is for Scottish schools, yes. It's the last week of the October holidays, and the Halloween talk is the last event for this year's Wild Goose Festival, so that'll be a very nice way to finish it off. And we're very much looking forward to it happening in the church and we're very grateful that the church are open to this as well. That's fantastic that our friends at the church are because not everybody feels that way about Halloween. So
Yeah.
it's good that the church are being receptive to that, and that they're able to see that there's a history and lineage, and also that there's an audience out there that might come into the church and that might spark an interest in its amazing history.
Yeah. No, I believe that's us. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed our first wee live stream.
Yes, it's a first for Dumfries Museum. We've been here since 1836, and this is our first YouTube live, but hopefully not the last. We'll see how we get on with this one, and we'll maybe do some more in future. It's nice to be able to engage with digital audiences as well as ones in real life.
Yeah. Fiona Lee, we're grateful to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
No, so we'll see you in the future, be that at the museum or, as I say, on one of our social media platforms. And thank you again for joining us. And we hope you have a lovely night.
Thank you. Bye.